Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can see our panel all joining us now. As you will see, we are now going live with our second Conservative Home fringe event of the day. I'm Mark Wallace, I'm the Chief Executive of Conservative Home, and you've joined us for this fascinating discussion in partnership with FTSE 100 Landsec on the role of responsible business in preventing offending and reoffending. We're extremely fortunate to be joined by a really fantastic panel today who've got a huge range of experience to give us some insight into this topic. We have the Justice Secretary, Robert Buckland, Colette, the Managing Director of FTSE 100 Landsec in London retail portfolios, Turly Humphreys of Circle Collective, and Nathaniel Campbell, who's a graduate. So we have a great range of insightful panelists. This as an issue is something that is very close to my heart personally, and it's something I think should be close to the heart of Conservatives everywhere. The fact is that people often talk about the Conservatives traditionally as having been a party of law and order. Obviously, as we all know, those issues are very close to the heart of, or of great concern to a huge number of people around the country. But the fact that a failure at offending and reoffending is a failure not just to protect wider society, but it's a failure of social justice. It's a failure to ensure people have the right life chances. It's a failure, frankly, when somebody ends up at risk of offending or involved in the criminal justice system, then that's a sign that that system and many of our other policies have, by definition, failed. As a result, it means that on every part of the state, we see aspects of that failure. People suffer directly, people suffer themselves, people as taxpayers suffer in terms of the additional cost. And of course, our society loses the positive, productive contributions of people who have fallen into unfortunate circumstances who could otherwise be doing other things with their lives. That's exactly what we're here to talk about today, being responsible and assist with that. Now, I'm aware that as far as I can see, we have a little bit of a technical problem affecting the feed from the Secretary for Justice. So if it's all right, we'll slightly change our running order for that purpose. And I'll introduce as our first speaker, Colette, who is the Managing Director for London and retail portfolios of FTSE 100 Landsec, our event partner today. She has extensive experience over 20 years in investment, asset management and development. And Landsec work very closely with Circle Collective along with other projects who are here on our panel today as well. So I hope you'll join me in welcoming Colette. I should say that any viewers who want to post questions, please click the Q&A button. That'll go through to our question moderator, and I'll try and bring you in the Q&A section later. But without further ado, a warm welcome to Colette.
Hi, thank you. So just to introduce myself and our programme, I work, as you've just heard, for Landsec. We're a property company, and we own and develop and manage office buildings in central London, and then we own a lot of shopping centres around the UK in major cities like Leeds, Glasgow, Cardiff, and our approach to the problem that you've identified, and clearly the societal costs are huge, is very much one of partnership. And this is something that we started probably nearly 10 years ago now. And what we do is we use our own buildings, our own supply chain, and then we partner with really, really great organisations like Circle, who we'll hear from in a minute. And our objective is really about giving people the skills, giving people education, and giving people access to employment that may otherwise be extremely difficult for them. And what we do is that we tackle things from many dimensions. We work very closely with schools. We give them children access to education programs, particularly focusing on our area of expertise, which is sort of construction, tech, sustainability, and strategic thinking. And so we're using all of our supply chain to support youngsters in schools. We then work very closely with young people who have really, have sort of a difficult time, don't have access to opportunities. And our objective is to help give them training. We work with colleges and, importantly, jobs. And the way that we do that is we work with our contractors, we work with the cleaning companies that we employ, we work with the concierge companies that we employ, and we enable people to actually get jobs and the requisite training that we need. And we've got some many success cases. And it's important for us, the partners that we work with. So when you hear from Circle, they're very much about focusing on preventative activity. And we also work very closely with an organisation called Bounce Back. And what they do is they set up education and training within prisons. So we work in prisons in London, and we've recently opened an academy in Leeds. And again, what we're doing is we're offering people training in the likes of scaffolding, dry lining, and also tech. And these are all things, again, that we do in with our own partners. So what we're really doing is we're creating a sort of ecosystem, utilising all the access to all the people that we work with. And the other reason that's really important is because we've come across experiences of people who actually get into employment and are holding down a job, but they may actually not have a home to live in. And the reason that we're working very closely with our own partners is because then they're trained and skilled to spot those issues, and they can then make contact with another partner to actually resolve some of these issues that people have. So we're really proud of our program. It's been hugely successful. We've had over 1,200 people into employment over the last couple of years. And the other thing that I think has been exceptionally important in the last 6 months, as we've all been going through this crisis, we've managed to maintain, work with and support all of our charity partners, all our education partners, all of our supply chain to continue all of our activities. So they may have changed, slightly adjusted, and I'm sure Turly will have some examples of that. But fundamentally, at a really important moment in our history, we're still able to provide the support that we set out to do. So on that note, I'll hand back to you.
Well, thank you very much for that, and that really helps to set the context and a lot of the context for the type of responsible business activity we're here to talk about today. Now, I'm told that those earlier teething issues we had with the Secretary of State for Justice's audio have now been resolved. Robert Buckland, hopefully you can hear me. We're very fortunate that Robert is here, obviously in his capacity as Secretary of State for Justice, and therefore as the most senior minister in the land in this field, but also he has extensive personal experience of having seen all sorts of different aspects of the system that we're here to talk about. In his career professionally before entering politics, he's a QC. He's also served, for example, as prisons minister, and of course now he oversees the Justice Department. So we're very fortunate that he's taken the time out of his Saturday to join this discussion, and I'm sure the audience will have lots of questions for you, Robert. So welcoming the Secretary of State, over to you. Oh, we appear to have a feed problem continuing there, possibly an audio problem. We'll try and resolve that. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, for that interruption. We'll continue trying to resolve that in the background of the tech wizardry while we continue the discussion, if that's all right. In that case, we'll bring in our next panelists. Now, Turly Humphreys is the CEO of Circle Collective, and I'm sure she'll give a brief introduction to her organisation herself in her remarks at the moment. But Circle Collective is a remarkable organisation, something that she set out one day, having been struck by an idea there might be potential to do something new and do something more. She went out and did it herself. They work with young people in a variety of challenging circumstances to help them improve their life prospects, and helping people to find routes into work. For example, someone will have a great deal of 76% of self-reflectors graduates go on to steady jobs, which is a remarkable achievement in itself, and I'm sure she'll have a lot of insight to offer us. So please welcome Turly Humphreys.
Good morning. Hello. What I'd like to do is just give an overview really of Circle and also our partnership with Landsec. I established Circle Community, which is a charity, and Circle Collective, which is a social enterprise, in 2010. And its aim is to support young people between the ages of 16 and 30 who generally have barriers and into permanent jobs. The issue that we're actually sort of trying to get hold of here is that if you ask any young person or any youth worker about street crime and gangs, they'll tell you that if the young person can get employment and financial independence, it's the best solution to stop them from falling into that trap. Many young people do not have role models who are working and cannot see the future where they are employed or can afford to support themselves. So they give up hope, and this is when they become vulnerable, and that's when they often fall into these situations. The partnership with Landsec was started 9 years ago, well, a year after we started, and it just grows stronger. We support each other, I believe, because we share the same values of supporting young people and creating better communities. This partnership, it's not about teams of corporate employees painting walls, even though that does happen. It's all ticking boxes. It's a lot deeper than that, and I'd like to go back to that in a second. The situation today is that most of the young people that come to us, there are a few job vacancies, but there is even less now that there's COVID. And what most of them don't have the skills or confidence to secure these jobs, and many of them don't actually know where to look for them. So we can see by our experience and constantly listening to these young people that their anxieties and social isolation is getting worse. Many are scared to go out, and many lack self-confidence and self-worth, with over 50% of the young people coming to us having no work experience at all. And this puts them into a cycle of not getting a job. What happens then is their confidence spirals. Many of them have attended courses which offer no practical help or interviews, but consist of box ticking for the delivery organisation, often to receive funding. But at Circle, we try and break that cycle. The model that we're based on is one-to-one mentoring and wraparound support, structured work experience, customer service training in our streetwear and skate shop, which is very appealing for the young people. And it's treated as a job would be treated, so they understand turning up on time and, dealing with money and dealing with the public. We do workshops facilitated by our professional coaches on building confidence, how to present yourself, and mindfulness to control your sleep and anxiety. We do workshops mostly facilitated by our corporate supporters in their volunteering in a real working environment on personal branding, interview skills, personal finance, and protecting your credit rating, which is it is incredibly important to them starting off. And because most of them are actually only on just over £50 a week. And we give them advice on jobs, careers, and recently how to navigate the gig economy rather than fall into it. This programme it's a roll on and off one, and it's around 10 weeks long, even though many leave beforehand, but others that don't, we always carry on supporting. And it's very person-centred with amazing results. And with our professional team and our corporate supporters, we've got over 500 young people into permanent jobs, which is a 76% success rate. Our financial model is based on multiple revenue streams, with corporate supporters targeted as our largest growth areas, knowing that budgets from councils have been cut and trust fund funding is totally oversubscribed. As a successful charity with high outcomes and a social enterprise ready to scale, Landsec support is so important. They give us jobs, funding, work experience, pro bono space, and it gives us the opportunity to increase our impacts when many community projects at this time are actually shutting their doors. Regarding the actual partnership with Landsec, I could go on forever, because over the time it's just grown deeper and deeper as we've both learned how to support each other's needs. It's just as important to bring in a group of young people to meet corporate staff and listen to their stories about careers ups and downs as it is staff to meet the young people who have had so much potential waiting to be unlocked. Circle helps corporates to gain a more diverse workforce, often more local to the job and already with an understanding of the working world and their path of it. Landsec and its contractors support experience, which is the best form of an interview for a young person, as many with a normal interview, often it's the person who actually does the talking that gets the job rather than the best person for the role. Landsec also supports Circle with celebrations and graduations, which are really important to these amazing young people. But for us and employability and the support we give young people, the most important thing we get from Landsec are the jobs. Landsec actually have some of our young people in their financial department, security, hospitality, cleaning, front of house, interns and managers. Young people who came from care were refugees, they came from prison, they came from youth offending. There's young people on the spectrum, they might have been traumatised and suicidal, but now they're all part of the community and financially independent. So for charities like us, we always lack resources, and corporate support can bring so much to the table, from money, skills, knowledge, facilitating, educating and celebrating. So our partnership with Landsec has led the way to see our social impact grow from around £4 to £6.78 for every pound that they've invested, and the knowledge that that partnership will support people like Nathaniel here and many young people to the right path to financial independence rather than the desperate alternative which all too often we see on the television news. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight to how we're trying to run a social enterprise and a charity in a more professional and commercial way.
Thank you very much to give us an insight. In itself is a remarkable story of the achievements that your organisation and those you work with have already secured. Now, before I move to introduce Nathaniel, our next speaker, can I quickly test whether the Secretary of State can hear me?
I can, finally. I'm sorry about that problem earlier, but I can hear you. And most importantly, I've been able to hear the speakers as well. So I'm enthused by what I'm hearing. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm very glad to hear that. It's not, as people who know me will attest, it's not often people say that they can't hear my voice. And it's also very distressing to me as a journalist not to be able to hear the sound of my own voice at the time. So what we'll continue with the lineup as originally as planned. We'll circle back to you, Robert, in a few minutes. So our next speaker, Turly was just talking about the hundreds of graduates that Circle Collective has worked with, people who they worked with in giving that great advice and training and coaching and development too. And we're very fortunate to be joined by someone who is a graduate of that school, who can tell us what it's like to actually experience it and gain the benefit of it. He's Nathaniel Campbell. He's a graduate of Circle Collective, and really I'll let him tell his story in his own words. Welcome, Nathaniel.
So good morning, everyone. So yeah, my name's Nathaniel. I'm a Circle Collective graduate. I'll tell you the story. So basically where it all began was at the time I was living in a YMCA. I wasn't really getting on pretty well with family. So I was quite the lone wolf at the time. And obviously I had an issue of being alone. So one night I was feeling really depressed. I was feeling really down. I was feeling quite suicidal as well. In the morning I called up Samaritans, and Samaritans told me to speak to my key worker downstairs. I spoke to them, and then they sent me to hospital. So I was in a mental ward for about, say, 2 weeks or so. And it was a really dark time for me. I wasn't too sure what was going on. At the time, I was also doing an apprenticeship, a level 2 administration apprenticeship that I pretty much quit at the time because I knew that it's not what I wanted to do. I didn't really want to go back. The pay wasn't good. So at that time now, I was in the mental ward for 2 weeks. It was a very depressive time. Various family members came to see me and stuff like that. And Yeah, so afterwards this, they gave me the mental health ward, they gave me a psychologist, and I was seeing a psychologist for 2 weeks. Well, I think it was about a month or so, afterwards being in the ward, and also I was connected to Hackney Mind, which is an organization that basically helped to support me as well. So I was on their email listings, and they had sent me an email regarding Circle Collective. So bear in mind at the time as well, I quit my apprenticeship, so I was back on income support, or it might have been job seekers allowance. I'm not too sure, but it might have been JSA. And I was living off like £25 a week because I had like various debts to do with the council and stuff. But I was living for £25 a week, so you can imagine I was just eating tuna pasta day in day out. It's not the best meal that you have 5 days a week. Essentially, it could have been nice to be a Thai. But so yeah, essentially, Circle Collective popped up in their email listings. It says something about apprenticeships and about they'll help you to find a job and they'll give you one-to-one person-centered support. I said, you know what, this sounds good. So I sent them an email right there and then. They pretty much got back to me instantly and told me that they should come to the office as soon as possible. I'm pretty sure it was like the following Tuesday. They told me to come through. So I came in and I met Turly and I met another employee of Circle Collective called Vicky. And pretty much instantly they made me feel very welcome, made me feel really warm. It's almost like I got a lot of mother vibes from them. They was just like very caring and loving. And they was just like, they saw something in me that I couldn't see. So, I was just like, why do these believe in me so much? I don't understand. I never really looked at myself like that. But yeah, I said, you know what, let me just roll over and see where this takes me, you know what I'm saying? So essentially, yeah, so I just decided to go on and I went through the process of learning the shop floor. They helped me work on my CV. They was giving me one-to-one support. They was, showing me how to, work the floor, the tools and stuff, so that I could have the experience to, put on my CV and, continue working and just essentially, get me somewhere I wasn't before. So I remember the day like it was yesterday. So yeah, I was on the floor behind the tills, just doing what I'm doing. And Turly came up to me and was like, Nathaniel, if we have an interview for you today, would you go to it? And I said, yeah, 100%. Tuna pasta is not the best food. I want to move up now, sort of thing, So she's like, okay, cool. And then she was like, yeah, we've got somewhere to go. It's in Blackfriars. It's called the Sea Containers. You're going to be able to interview with a company called Anabas, which is a facilities management company. And I said, yeah, that's fine. But I'm wearing Air Forces and combats from Primark and stuff. So surely I can't go right now. I need to go home and change it. She's like, no, it's fine. They don't mind. It's okay. Just turn up and you'll be fine. So they got me an Oyster card. They paid for the Oyster card travel because I didn't have that. They put money on the Oyster card and then gave me the directions and I went. So I went to Anabas now. I went into this massive building. Obviously, I'm not too sure if anyone knows the building, but it's like this 12th floor building. It was amazing. Walk inside, luxurious essentially. So nothing I've experienced. And then I met the manager there. I believe his name was John Burgess, I believe. And yeah, spoke to John Burgess. We sat down and he asked me a couple of questions. I showed him that I'm determined. I'm ready to work. So I told him my current situation. I'm very motivated. I'd like to do it, essentially. And then he said, you know what, yeah, that sounds good. And then he basically told me, come in tomorrow and let's begin. And I was like, what? Just like that. And literally just like that, I came back to Circle Collective, told them the good news. They were so proud of me. And of course, I was proud of them. And I was like, thank you guys so much. And it's only recently that I understand what they meant by, it was like, it wasn't us, it was you. And I was like, what do you mean? And I understood that, it's just I had to just basically turn up. And obviously, you can only help someone if they're willing to be helped. And that's pretty much like the heart and soul of Circle Collective. It's almost like if the young people are willing to help themselves, then Circle Collective will help, period. And, you'll get what you need to get out of Circle Collective if they have the motivation and drive. But also Circle Collective help with that motivation and drive. Because honestly, I was at a very low point. But, I just said, I want to, turn up. And yeah, they basically they set the path for me because imagine if Circle Collective wasn't there, I don't know where I'd be. Like at the moment, I'm not even at the facilities anymore. I said, you know what, they've inspired me so much the way that they work with young people that I'm going to work with young people as well. So right now I'm actually working in a single homeless project charity called it's called Single Homeless Project, and I've just been supporting young people with high and complex needs, basically just through pure inspiration from the support that Self Collective have. They set like a body for me to move forward in regards to the way that they supported me, and I just want to make sure that I'm that ambassador to bring that vibe out to the rest of the world, for them to see the vibes that Circle Collective gave me, and it's been a dream essentially. So they changed my life, and I'm really happy about the impact they've had. Like I said, who knows where I'd be if it wasn't for Circle Collective? Could be going down a darker route, but they pulled me away from that. So yeah, it's been a dream, and I thank them so much, and that's my story.
Well, thank you for sharing that story with us, and that I think underscores to all of our panelists and to the audience that while we talk about policy issues or about the kind of headline aspects of government policy and so on, what we're really here to talk about right now is exactly that: how to change people's lives and to help people change their own lives as well. And that story of persistence and resilience on your part, support at exactly the right time from the right people, is precisely what we're here to discuss. So that was fascinating. Thank you. Now, I gave him a warm welcome earlier. I'm going to give him a warm welcome again, so he can hear it this time. As I said, Rob Buckland is a QC in his professional background. He has previously served as prisons minister, and he's now the Secretary of State for Justice. And we're very fortunate that he's here to join us to give his own perspective and the government's perspective on this essential topic. So I hope you'll all join me in giving a very warm welcome. Applause at home, if you wish, to Robert Buckland.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that warm welcome, an audible welcome this time. And in a way, I suppose it was appropriate for us to hear from the various participants, different organisations, agencies, businesses, charities, about how coming together and working together we can actually start to make a difference here. I mean, I come to this role after many, many years in practice, having represented a lot of people in the position that we've just heard so eloquently described to us. People who have ended up in a position that I don't believe any of them want to be, but which it proves so difficult to get out of without the sort of help that we've heard described. And it can be simple, straightforward, but immediate help that makes a practical difference. And the challenge, facing us is one that, whilst it has been a one of long standing, is one that has almost been seen, I think, by many of my predecessors as perhaps too difficult to deal with. It's just something you have to live with, that people who get into trouble with the law don't get jobs. I refuse to accept that, because long ago I learned that there were three things that were the root out of crime, fundamentally: a home, a job, and a friend. And with those three, I saw many, many people not return to the criminal justice system because of that type of support. And therefore, getting a job, getting employment, has to be very much at the heart of what we need to do in government. And we have already a very ambitious strategy relating to how we deal with employment across government strategy, which is all about improving those rather depressing statistics, frankly, about employment. Looking at statistics relating to offenders released from custody in the last year, and that this is where we knew about their circumstances. Only 12% were employed 6 weeks after release from custody, meaning a whopping 88% of people still not in work. And then on the other side, where we have the evidence about people getting P45 employment, the statistics are really encouraging. Offenders who found that type of employment in the 12 months after their release from prison had reoffending rates that were between 6 and 9 percentage points lower than similar offenders who did not find employment. Now, some people might be thinking, well, that doesn't sound very much, but believe me, every percentage point of reduction in reoffending presents thousands, not just of offenders, but thousands of fewer victims of crime too. And therefore, in this particular area, that sort of statistic is deeply significant, and it's one that we have to focus on when we drive forward change. Now, the Ministry of Justice cannot do this on its own. It has to work, first of all, with the Department for Work and Pensions, and you'll be glad to know that Therese Coffey and her team are as dedicated as my team is to help improve offender employment, even in this difficult COVID situation. And we have a national partnership agreement for employment and indeed welfare support for people coming out of custody into the community, which is underpinned by the presence of DWP prison work coaches to support people in prison to access either benefits and indeed employment. And in the last year, the Ministry of Justice has set up the New Futures Network, which is an employment brokerage. And we have employment brokers in place in every prison group across England and Wales, working with private employers to bring those opportunities into our prisons. And it's not just in the private sector that we're taking action. The civil service have the Going Forward into Employment scheme, directly recruiting ex-offenders in service. It's been running now for 2 years and is being rolled out nationally. And as a result of our election victory, the prison education service that was very much at the core of our proposals is being developed to bring together all the best practice that we have within the custodial environment to improve education and skills training. Now, all of this sounds great, but none of it will be achieved without the help and support of business, of industry, and indeed of the organisations that we see represented here today. And that's why my officials are dedicated to working with the companies like Greggs, like Timpson's, like some of the smaller enterprises that are quietly getting on with the task of knowingly employing ex-offenders, but giving them that important second chance. And I think now the task of ministers is to translate the fine-sounding strategy into real results. And that's why listening today to the points being made, it helps me to redouble my efforts to ensure that indeed the practical help on the ground is there, not just for the ex-offenders themselves, but also for those charities, those community investment companies, the CICs, and indeed businesses, to be able to talk to each other, to come together and to get that vital support in order to allow more people to access employment. I'll stop there because there are going to be lots of questions. There's lots of other aspects to this that we can talk about, and I look forward to the discussion ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, As you very helpfully gave me an intro to that, we're going to move on to Q&A. And I would just remind the audience that there will be a Q&A button on your screen. If you click it, you can type in any questions you might have. They'll go through to my colleagues, the question operating gnomes behind the scenes here, who will pick some out and they'll ping up on my screen. And one thing, actually, I'm going to use the tyrannical power of the event chair to ask a question of my own first, if that's all right. Robert, you mentioned just now the way that you work with other departments, and obviously when we heard earlier from organisations like Circle Collective who work not with offenders in the system, but with people who are vulnerable or in challenging circumstances, in order to help them find paid, sustainable work. You have a range of organisations that work with people, I suppose, in that early intervention, well before people get into the criminal justice system, to help people to effectively help make your department's job easier by preempting any issues that might emerge. How does that work in terms of the Ministry of Justice, say, working with other departments or organisations in helping to reduce the circumstances that might see somebody engage with criminal justice?
Well, Mark, that's a really powerful question, because I'm consistently make the point to my colleagues in the Criminal Justice Task Force, that is a cabinet committee chaired by the Prime Minister, that by the time I am having to deal, or my department is having to deal with these issues, a lot of the damage, frankly, has been done. And the MOJ is left to clear up the consequences of offending after the event. And I just frankly think that's not good enough. Unless I get the buy-in, the active buy-in of the Department for Education, for example, or the Department for Health as well, who often can help legally in diagnosing some of the underlying conditions that sadly are present in a large measure of particularly young offenders, I find, in the custodial system, then we really are failing in our task. I've made the point before that every department or state needs to be a criminal justice department. And what I mean by that is that through better diagnosis, for example, of learning difficulties, communication skills issues, then instead of branding young people as failures, as dropouts, as the sort of people who frankly do anything with, we'll be able to engage much more constructively with them and to guide them into the right path, as opposed to leaving them into the hands and letting them fall into the hands of others who are somewhat more unscrupulous. As part of my recent sentencing white paper, I'm launching a nationwide call for evidence about autism, ADHD, and other what we call neurodiverse conditions. In other words, learning disabilities and other types of conditions that are so prevalent within the system. Because I want to do two things. One, I want to make sure that the criminal justice system better understands and deals with individuals with those conditions. But secondly, to take your point, I want to be able to do more in terms of prevention further down the line. And I want that body of evidence to be the basis of some real change in our system so that we can, as you suggest, really do more in terms of diversion. There's a lot going on at the moment with youth offending teams doing that work locally, quietly. We're seeing a change and a reduction in the number of young people coming into the secure estate. But it's clear to me that we need to do more and we need to do it earlier. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll move now to our first audience question. Turly, this is a question for you, I think. One of our listeners, Rosemary Gaskell, thank you for your question, Rosemary. She says, how do you tackle literacy difficulties among learners?
Well, we have numerous organisations that we work with and we can signpost to. It's like Nathaniel came from Mind, and what we generally do is I actually, my theory on what we do here is if somebody wants a job, they should be able to have a job. And there are jobs out there, regarding you can point to someone towards going and doing an online literacy course, or you can point them to a college. But a lot of people, they don't want to do that. They need work and they need money quickly. So we will always help them with job applications and support them with things like that. And there's certain jobs out there which actually are more sort of hands-on rather than, sort of the paperwork ones. I mean, there's some Primark are always very good at putting people in the stock rooms with the literacy isn't their top thing, and also language. And there's other things like companies we work with, like Landsec and Anabas, that understand certainly young people on the spectrum and things like that. And again, they're not interviewed in the normal way. They're allowed to do work experience. And then if they can cope with the work experience, and they're often actually, the company said they can't have them back, we want them. So that's how we would go.
Thank you. And Colette, from an employer's perspective, what kind of adjustment, is there an adjustment for a company like Landsec, for example, changing its kind of outlook on who it hires and how it works with organisations like Turly's to understand the needs and how to support graduates into work?
Yeah, it has to be something that you really believe in. And I think, when you just hear Turly talking, hear Nathaniel talking about Turly, there's got to be a real emotional connection and a real drive. And at Landsec, that is something we are really committed to. Our employment programme is the thing that our staff, when we do surveys, is the most thing that they are most proud of in our whole business. So that shows, so you've got a real sort of will, so you've got a whole sort of workforce that want to make this work. And with that, then you get the necessary sort of cultural environment to give people the opportunity and the support. And actually, do you know what? Most people, if they're asked for help or support or mentoring, people love doing it. Yeah. And so for me, it really is a cultural thing. It's a belief. It's something that our staff really, really care about. But then it goes beyond that, because our real leverage is, as I said, our supply chain. We've got £13 billion of assets. We employ a lot of contractors. We employ a lot of cleaning companies. We employ a lot of concierge companies. We have access to, 600 retailers, all of whom are looking for employees. And they too want to do the right thing. And our role really is about leadership, and it's about showing other companies what the art of the possible is. And when they get emotionally connected, which they are, then you get a really sort of powerful group who really want to make all this work. And it really is amazing, when you hear the stories, like I've heard many stories like Nathaniel's. And when you actually see, when I go into one of our office buildings and I see someone that has come out of one of our programs sitting, looking amazingly competent on an office desk, looking after a building, somebody who maybe is looking after security in one of our shopping centres. And it's all doable. It's all doable with a bit of will, with clearly you need money. But as I said, for me, the most important thing is the drive and enthusiasm and the networking. And it's the creating the ecosystem so that people can move, as we've heard, from a mind to a circle into employment, and then into taking what they've learned and creating the next support group. So that's the really critical thing in all of this.
Turly, on the back of that, are there things that government could do you think, that could encourage more businesses to do the kind of thing that Colette was just talking about, help you kind of get that foot in the door and get the introduction or the encouragement to participate and help you into their operations and into their supply chains?
Oh, there's no end that could be done. I mean, I come from a commercial background, and the problem I find in this sector is that it's not a sector that is nurtured to increase its outcomes and expand. And what we've tried to do with our social enterprise is actually have a commercial part that will then generate an income, because we know what's happening with the councils and the trust funds. But regarding funding, we've got a very good relationship with the DWP, the East London DWP, which has taken, it's taken 6-7 years to nurture, and it's fantastic, and we're getting opportunities from it. But we're totally under-resourced, and what happens often is that the government money that comes to us is for what I call the nice bit, the course, but actually to expand and to get more resources and things like that is incredibly difficult. That's why, with corporates, if it's unrestricted funding, it's like gold dust.
Thank you. And a question here from the Secretary of State, I think, from a listener, Kirk Wilson, who asks, can the government do more to help young people to start up their own businesses? We've seen obviously an increase in recent years of young people setting out on their own as self-employment or business and so on. Is there something the government can help to make that easier to access?
Well, yeah, I think young people who have previous convictions have a particular challenge. But overall, I think what we've done on apprenticeships, the COVID response in particular has been, I think, groundbreaking. And the Kickstart scheme is, I think, the first time we're really seeing a focus in a way that I think other schemes have not achieved in the past. Actually, looking at what are the drivers here in terms of support for employers, the right rate of pay, the duration of those schemes, and really, concentrating on what will make employers sit up and think, do you know what, this is absolutely worth my while in doing this and giving a young person that opportunity. But when it comes to young people who perhaps got into trouble with the law, I do think there's more that we can do. And I think the point's made about the cultural change, and that the fact that some companies, Turly's and others, have in effect taken it as part, more, not just about corporate responsibility, but a badge of pride and achievement, if you like, in the sense they're helping people into work. I think whilst that obviously needs to be encouraged, there is more that we can do in government in order to help with the framework, in particular the rehabilitation of offenders. At the moment, the current rules do mean that a large number of people, including young people, still have to disclose their previous conviction to an employer for a considerable period of time after their conviction or their sentence is completed. I think there's more that we can do to reduce those terms. And in fact, in the white paper, I've set out the proposals to do that, balancing out the need for public protection when it comes to serious crimes of sexual offences and violence, for example. But I do think that also within government and the civil service, by taking on more people with previous convictions, it's the right tone and example about what opportunities might exist out there. And then also with regard to things like the Ban the Box campaign, which is all about trying to sort of encourage employers to no longer just look at this as a sort of tick box exercise, and to take into, I think, to full account the fact that whilst some people might have had a difficult background, it doesn't mean that they're beyond hope or beyond redemption, or indeed beyond employment. And therefore, I think the focus has to be now, coming back to the issue that was raised about young people, several things. One, giving them that opportunity even though they might have committed offences. But first of all, and most importantly, making sure that we identify young people at risk of getting into criminality, support them through those difficult formative years. The mentoring schemes that I see out there in the community, the work, as I mentioned, of the young offenders, the yachts, the youth offending teams in local areas, all these are having an effect already in reducing the number of young people actually coming through the criminal justice system itself. And further, with the work that's being done on out-of-court disposals, rather than pressing the prosecutorial button, taking another approach and giving that young person that crucial second chance before they get formally into the system, I think the combination of that is already yielding forth some interesting results, and I think there's more that we can do to develop further.
Thank you. We've got another audience question. This, I think, I'd be interested in a number of candidates on this. It's from a listener called Mike Ballinger. He says, "My company has been asked to give ex-offenders work. We are sympathetic, but also concerned about the reaction of current employees to whom we have a duty of care." Colette, again, from a kind of corporate perspective, I think quite a lot of what we've talked about so far has been the changing attitudes and the changing mindset of companies across all sorts of different sectors. Evidently, your own has been quite forward-thinking in terms of the kind of projects it supports. How easy is it for companies to adjust when we talk about changing from talking about second chances to actually make it happen, make it fit into a company's structure?
I mean, what I would say to that is that, first of all, we've had brilliant experiences of this. We work with an organisation I referred to earlier called Bounce Back, and they are very heavily involved with education and training programs within the prison. So this is giving people the right skills and the right sort of mindset before they actually leave. And what we've discovered is that people who go through a bounce back program the reoffending rates are only about 12%, as opposed to the national rates of about 50%. So I think the important thing is the way that people coming out of prison are treated, the way that they're supported. So Bounce Back then will give ongoing pastoral care. And I mentioned this point that, you know, we've had examples where people have been in employment but have had no home. They're holding down a job with no home. And it's only through the pastoral care that you work that out, and then you can sort of find a solution. So for me, it's about having the right support in place for these people that are coming out of prison, and the right pastoral care and support when they are then in the workplace. And I think then it becomes very real. And as I said, for us has been very, very successful. And, you know, we're working with many partners. So there are many businesses who are employing people that have come out of prison. And, you know, there is a mindset clearly, but I do think it is about the support and the pre-training and then the pastoral care afterwards. So I think sometimes just to expect people to make a sort of quantum leap by themselves is just not possible. And I was really struck by the Secretary of State's comments that he's worked out that there are 3 things people really need, and that's a home and a job and a friend. And, you know, we can help with the job and with the sort of pastoral care. As you heard from Turly, people get a friend, and we can help with the home. So I think it's something that is, in our case, has been very successful, but has been about having the right programs in place to support all the activity. Because it's, you know, and I really reinforce, it's not just about the job. It has to be everything that goes with living.
And presumably when it comes to integrating people from, say, a scheme like Bounce Back into your company, but into the wider workforce, presumably that's about communication with the rest of the workforce as well, explaining how this works and why your company supports the schemes that it does.
Yes, it is. And as I said, you know, in my company, this is what people are the proudest of, and people on the whole believe in second chances.
I think we've suffered another connection problem there. So let's move on to another question. We can come back to that in a moment, assuming we get the Secretary of State back in just a second. Is there a question for all of you, really? Gina, who's one of our listeners, asks whether the government ought to offer incentives to businesses. So she points to, in the United States, there's a scheme to encourage businesses to hire former offenders involving tax credits. Similarly, I suppose there's no reason why a scheme like that couldn't be extended to people who've been referred through, say, organisations like mine or Social Collective in other circumstances. Colette?
I think incentives is an interesting idea. I suppose I would probably rather see the money going into the programme of support rather than necessarily simply an incentive to employers, because what I worry is that you provide an employer with the incentive, they then maybe simply recruit somebody, but if that person hasn't got the right support and the pastoral care that I described earlier, then it may not be a success. And we could see a lot of people coming in and out of employment. So in an area where we're really strapped for resources, I would probably rather see more money going into programs like Turly's, like the Bounce Back provides, you know, the all-round training, care, support.
Turly, I imagine your feeling on that's probably quite similar.
Yeah, well, I think for me, I mean, what we do is one of the most vulnerable times is actually when they go into the job, because we can help them with their CV, and when they go for the interview, they know what they're going for, and we've explained how their behaviour should be. But if they come off government JSA, they come off immediately, and they might not be paid for a month. So from that point of view, like Nathaniel mentioned his Oyster card and that, we carry on supporting them. because you get this cycle. We get people that come here that have done 13 different courses in employability and never had an interview because somebody somewhere is being given some money and they're ticking a box. And that is, you know, the thing, again, going back to Landsec, is they know how we work. You know, they invest in companies like, or charities like ourselves and Bounce Back that really care about the people. And it's often, you know, it's the smaller companies as well, or smaller charities that find it difficult. But an incentive, you know, that, like I said, I'm not sure how that would work, but we're going to be very involved in the Kickstarter. But the Kickstarter won't necessarily take our young people. So again, it's a lovely idea if it was like the Futures Job Fund, but it actually takes a lot of control out of our hands back into the job centres when we've actually got some employers that have got jobs and then we've got young people ready for jobs, but we can't match them up.
There's an issue that's often been discussed, that there's a break point in, for example, delivery of social services between social care for children and teenagers and then social care for adults, where sometimes people can be within the system, known to the system, in some cases living in care, for example, but on their 18th birthday, it's all too easy for them to simply to drop out of the system and not have that transition, which seems a peculiar thing for a bureaucracy as big as ours to allow to happen.
Yeah, actually, there was I mean, there's some samples of young people that have come from care that are actually employed by Landsec now. There's one who's a manager who's got 10 guys working for him, and he dropped out of care and was a very angry young man because he'd been a refugee. And when he got to 18, they said, right, the money stops, and he wanted to go to uni to be an architect, but he didn't want to live in a hostel. He wanted a little place of his own. So he came to us quite angry. And then we did our magic, and then Landsec supported him. And now he's a manager in one of their buildings. You know, I mean, that dropout from care can be awful. We've often seen young people coming in saying, I'm going to lose my home, you know, and you need to work with them very, very quickly. We both in Hackney and Lewisham, we've dealt with, we deal very well with people from care because they need that wraparound service.
And I'm pleased to a welcoming back. I think he suffered some technical problems there. The next question I was going to pick out from our audience is from Kirk Wilson. He asks, do schools need for students who are less academic and might prefer a more work-based education to tailor education, he says, to stop them truancy from school? That would also apply simply to engaging people right way through the education system. Secretary of State.
I think, again, a really important question that gets to the heart of the matter, because one of the problems that we experience is with a number of youngsters getting excluded from school. And that exclusion can mean either a complete break with education or a referral to a pupil support unit. And frankly, some of those units do better than others in being kind. And I feel that exclusions are often not the beginning end of a litany of failure, because going back to the point we were making earlier about the interventions that are needed, if a young person, you know, has ended up in a position where they're being excluded from education, then you know, we can't. Whilst I think it's tempting to put the blame on them, I think that is entirely wrong, and therefore getting the right diagnoses, getting the right support into the earliest stage, I think can reduce the number of exclusions, and also, you know, therefore give a higher degree of support for young people, you know, through that particularly difficult stage in their lives. I mean, I see some really good work go with some of our UTCs, the University Technological Colleges, who have different types of courses, and you know, and approach sometimes lends itself, frankly, to sport for people who are otherwise at risk of going the wrong path. But without that sort of mainstream education engagement, then I do think that, you know, we will continue down this road of more exclusions, more dislocation, fewer opportunities for the authorities to engage with young people, and a descent into criminality. You know, the county lines phenomenon, I'm afraid, is as much a result of the abuse and exploitation of young people as it is about organised crime. And particularly young people who've been excluded from school are a ready pipeline of supply for those who wish to exploit them by use on the county lines network. We're seeing it across the country. Whilst crime enforcement is doing an important job in apprehending and often supporting young people, you know, by that time, again, the damage has been done, which is why I think we need to do more to reduce the number of exclusions and to support young people in the education system.
Colette, when you're looking at people listening today, wondering how they might, who will be working with social enterprises and charities who are thinking about doing the kind of thing that Turly's achieved, when they're thinking about that, how important is it to be able to demonstrate real success? Because it's quite shocking to hear the numbers that Turly was just talking about, that there are some people who can go through 12, 13 more training courses that presumably someone somewhere, possibly the taxpayer in some cases, is paying for, but that aren't actually delivering a change. And how do you go about, as a company, distinguishing between what's worth supporting and what isn't? And how, if people are thinking about trying to get up and do something, how can they make sure they're doing something that actually works?
Yeah, do you know, that's a really, really important question. And you know, when Turly and we all got together, she wasn't delivering 500 jobs at that stage. But what I would say is that we're looking for partners like Turly who are really committed, have an idea that we think has legs, and what we do is we allow them to grow, we support them to grow in terms of their initiatives. So all the partners that we're working with have grown through their connection with us, and it's allowed each of them to evolve their activities, broaden their activities, and get to a place where they can deliver the numbers that Turly is talking about. So it's really important for us. And I think, again, what I would say is it's been the strength of the partners that we've got that has enabled us to keep going with all of our activities over the last 6 months, and we'll continue to keep them going. So we're looking for people that have a passion and that we believe ultimately can grow. And I think it's almost about starting. We started quite small as well, and we went down a few blind alleys. And I think it's being prepared to just trial things, give things a chance, and you know, if they're not working, then stop them and try something else.
And Nathaniel, could I bring you in on that aspect, please? You know, from your own experience, from what you said earlier, you encountered some official schemes that were there but either didn't reach you or didn't help in the way that Circle Collective ended up doing. Could you give us your own perception, someone who's come through this scheme, about what it is that felt like it was the reason why this in particular made a difference to you, and how it managed to, why it engaged you where other things maybe didn't?
What you mean is in what the comparison between somebody else and me, whether it worked for me and not for somebody else?
No, us as an organisation compared with other organisations that you've had experience of, what is the difference you think that you got from Circle that you weren't getting somewhere else that lifted you and got you into a job?
Okay, no, it's all right. Yeah, so I'd say I think, well, like I said, when I come into Circle Collective, they saw something, like I said, that I didn't see within myself. And in throughout my life, there's only certain people that can see something that I can't see. And a lot of times in like other experiences where I've gone to people, even like the YMCA that I used to live in, you can see that the people there, they were just there to, you know, sort of get their money and, you know, head out. It's just like their normal 9 to 5. Because even in the YMCA that I worked, that I lived in, they had also like a support network there too, but they just didn't have the drive or the passion to actually, use the resources that they had. So it would be a sort of thing. It would be like a dead end. It would be like they didn't have the resilience, essentially, whereas Circle Collective did, and whereas I did too. So then we came at a level where it was like, hey, you know what, we both have resilience. Let's work together and let's make something great. But like I said, with like obviously a great example was why I'm saying I was actually living there, but I didn't get anything at all except from the only support I got was obviously when I'll be like, okay, I'm suicidal, which where they had to make a move because like, okay, if there's a time to make a move, that's the point. And which way they send me a taxi to go to the hospital. But in regards to things that are on like the surface level, things like getting some of the jobs type stuff, the resilience wasn't there. It was almost like I said, it was almost like they were just just kind of coasting. And yeah, like I said, with Circle Collective, I came in, and the energy that they gave me from the beginning stayed all throughout up until today. Here I am, and honestly, like I said, I mean, that's the difference between somebody that's actually passionate about their job, somebody that has resilience, someone that's a company that's determined, compared to people that are just obviously like just kind of winging it sort of thing. So yeah, essentially that was the difference that I felt with Circle Collective and my experience with them compared to other experiences with other organisations in regards to getting a job.
Some schemes that the state provides and some schemes that the state supports work, which is great, but evidently some don't work. And so how does MOJ go about finding the ones that are succeeding and, for that matter, reforming or ending the ones that are failing?
By schemes, what do you mean? Do you mean actually educational schemes or employment schemes themselves?
Well, I think a mixture. So you were talking earlier about the type of support that's provided to people who are in prison, for example, or people who are former offenders, or people, as you said, the schemes that are provided in order to help people avoid getting into the criminal justice system in the first place. So if you're talking, when we're looking, if you think specifically about rehabilitation programs, for example, for former offenders, how does the government go about assessing the ones that work and dealing with the ones that don't seem to be or can't produce the evidence?
Well, I think the assessment process is one really about the proportion of people that do not come back into the system in terms of reoffending within a year of I think the test has been within a year of release from custody. I think the truth is that it is difficult actually for us to have a sort of comprehensive overview of the success or otherwise of every individual scheme. I think there are a couple of things here. One, within prison, I think the provision of education and skills training has been, over the last several years, not an easy situation. We've recommissioned the way in which that was done in the last couple of years, and now we're pulling together, as a national prison education service, a more coordinated approach. We don't necessarily want to sort of reinvent the wheel where we've got courses that are working well, or we've got partnerships that are working well in the local prison setting. But at the same time, I think the frustration that I have, having been involved in the system, now as a minister in this department for the last 18 months, is that where we have best practice, it isn't often effectively shared, and that information isn't disseminated in a way that I think would be helpful. And that's why the National Education Service, I think, will help to improve that. And then on the other side of things, I think the idea that the ministry can sort of direct every particular person into a job or have that sort of top-down approach is, I think, fanciful and wrong, which is why working with organisations like the ones represented today, like a lot of other particular enterprises we have out there, that will unlock increasing opportunity for more people. So the New Futures Network, which was set up about 2 years ago, which is the employment brokerage service that is controlled by the MOJ, is, I think, going to be the sort of core of this approach. And already they're working with 600 different employers and different firms, ranging from the big chains that know about to very small companies that are doing their big take on apprentices or bring people back into employment. So I think it's the job of ministers and me to keep a very close eye on the outcomes from the New Futures Network. And with the reforms that I've undertaken to the probation service, in effect bringing it back to a more national framework, I think it'll be easier for me to have direct sight into that so that I can be satisfied or not that the programmes that we are supporting are in fact having the beneficial effect that we all want to see. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to add something to that because I think it would be amazing if we could wave a wand and focus on the programs that are very successful and stop the ones that aren't. But as the Secretary of State said, it's very, very hard to do that. What I would say is going the other way round, where we have approached government with ideas and sort of shown the value of those ideas, we've found government to be very, very supportive, particularly authorities where we've had 6 monies that go into education and training. We've been allowed to put those into this programme, and those local authorities are part of the ecosystem that we work with. They will put people through our programme. Bounce back working in the prisons, again, really pushing against an open door. But it's really been down to us and our partners to approach government with the ideas. But when we do, government is very receptive.
That's certainly encouraging to hear. We had a question from a listener in local government, Councillor Basil Solomon, who says, thanks for the great work. How can we get this example of support and potential for change out to everyone? Now, I know we heard a little bit about that just now when Colette's talking to ministers about it. Obviously, part of what we're doing, Basil, is having an event like this helps to spread the news to different people in different parts of the country as well. But Turly, how best can we spread these lessons and also the example? And as a second question that I'd add on, do you want? Would it be better for Circle Collective to kind of grow and grow? Have you got ambitions to expand into other cities, or do you speak to people, or do you hear from people in other parts of the country who want to copy what you've done and learn from your experience?
Mm. Yes. I mean, I do talk a lot about the impact and how we do what we do. And there's a lot of interest. We've had interest from Nottingham and down on the South Coast and different things. But I mean, at the moment we're scaling with Landsec because they're supporting us with, they're supporting us with all the things I've said, the jobs, the work experience, the money. And actually, we've got a fantastic new large shop that they are where the young people do their actual training. So as the shops, as there are empty shops, we plan to be able to scale up. But what stops us scaling is the shortness of the contracts from the DWP. I can't take a shop with a training area on a year's contract. So from my point of view, if there were 3 or 5 years contract, we would be able to scale fairly quickly because it's not rocket science what we're doing. But it's that corporate support that's actually, and like I said, it's like gold dust, enables us to spend more time with a young person. It's that wraparound and really getting to find out what their issues are, and also speaking to the employers who are genuinely want to help. And I have had a quote from one employer say, if it wasn't for your program, we'd never get to see these young people, because for a front of house job or a security, they'd ask for 3 years experience. Whereas if they partner with us, they get somebody that knows, that's already done customer service, that's trusted and has gone through a training program. So from my point of view, I'd love to scale this to help young people, but it does need those contracts that we don't have to go through the whole process every year to renew.
And the Secretary of State, is that something that that kind of cross-department working we're talking about would presumably apply to that?
Yeah, I mean, a really interesting point that's just been made, and the work that we're doing cross-government, chaired by the Prime Minister, the Criminal Justice Task Force, is all about identifying, first of all, some ambitious targets for increasing employment amongst ex-offenders, and then following that through over the next several years. So, the point about 1 year fixes is well understood. This is something that we need to, plan for over, frankly, the remainder of this Parliament, to take a particular timescale, and with those targets or milestones in sight, then we can start to make progress. But you're right, unless we get those multi-year agreements and those multi-year arrangements in place, then organisations like the ones we're hearing from will not be able to focus on that further horizon in a way, I think, that would be conducive to stability for those we are seeking to get into work on a permanent basis.
Thank you. Colette, I know that companies talking together, for example, about skills in the education system. Obviously, we'll be discussing with ministers and government departments what kind of workforce you'd like to see in the future. And we've seen this shift in recent years to the expectation that full-time education runs to 18. A lot of jobs that arguably, and careers in fact, in professions that will want something that you might be able to leave school, perhaps having had a difficult time as a young person or unfortunate experience in formal education. There were routes in to enter professions later in life. Is there a risk that our shift towards expecting a lot of careers are degree-based, that assessment of young people entering the workplace has to be reliant on the qualifications and the paper they can display? Is there a risk that does, frankly, deny people the second chance at life when their first chance may have been removed from them through no fault of their own?
Yeah, very, very much so. And I think there has been too much emphasis on degrees and pieces of paper. And interestingly, the people that we have coming through our employment program who don't necessarily have those pieces of paper, they are highly, highly valued members of the workforce. And Turly gave an example of somebody who's now managing a team of 10 people, and they are very focused and very, very driven, and they have a sort of drive and a focus that I think is probably lacking with some people maybe who've had more formal, easier route through to the workplace. And I think we need in businesses diversity in its absolute broadest sense, diversity of backgrounds, diversity of thinking, and by not accessing that huge population of people, I think businesses are losing an opportunity. And I just love to see the drive that and just see them succeed and see them progress and move through the business. And we don't mind whether they stay with us or actually they have successes elsewhere. That's the important thing for us.
Right. We have a question from a listener. I think this is particularly for the Secretary of State. This is from Alison Hernandez, who asks, when will we enable the criminal justice system to work better in partnership at a local level rather than be coordinated by central government? So how does localism apply to the criminal justice system?
Well, in the context of the discussion that we're having, without the enterprise and initiative of CICs, charities, and indeed employers, then government isn't going to get anywhere. What national government should be doing is setting a framework, a very clear framework within which then 100 flowers can bloom, if you like, to employment. I think what has gone wrong in the last few years is that because we, I think with good intention, tried to, in effect, create a system whereby offences of lesser seriousness were dealt with by the community rehabilitation companies, the probation reform changes, leaving the hardcore of very serious offences to be dealt with by the National Probation Service. That I'm afraid it did lead to something of a dislocation between the intentions of the MOJ and the reality on the ground. And I think now the recasting of the probation service structure, nothing to be, by the way, I don't want bureaucracies and bureaucracy taking on this work. Instead, a sort of light touch national, which we can see, various enterprises, including some of these small organisations who have perhaps expertise with veterans or expertise with disability, who can work with us in order to get them into employment and get them away from crime. That sort of mixed approach, one that I very much want to see. I mean, I'll make no, but it does have to be a pretty significant degree of national direction and drive on this, because it is vitally important in the system in England and Wales that there is consistency, and that what might be available in Cardiff should also be equally available in Southampton, for example. I'm thinking of particular programmes designed to support people with an addiction or a health problem who've ended up in the criminal justice system. And therefore, in my mind, rather than this being a sort of local versus national struggle, actually there are other more fun that needs to work here. And I've talked about some of the other government departments who I need in the room with me. I've not mentioned MHCLG, local government and communities, will help. I would not be able to work expansively on improving accommodation for ex-offenders, something that's been alluded to earlier, but which for me is at the heart of the strategy that I'm adopting as Secretary of State. We saw in COVID the unprecedented involvement of the MOJ in actually housing people coming out of prison, and doing so in a way that meant that we reduced the number of homeless people dramatically. Frankly, whilst that was an emergency response to an emergency solution, it's taught us about some long-term benefits that can be realised as a result of our approach to accommodation. And unless I get the sort of sense of national ownership of that, my worry is that, if it is left to local initiative, that again we'll have far too patchy a response to this. So I think with the national sort of framework and the national leadership with Courage Local initiative, then I think we will get the balance right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we've had a fascinating discussion. There's a huge amount more we could discuss, but our time now, I'm afraid to say, is coming to an end. So it falls to me to say it's been a pleasure to chair this event. Thank you very much to Robert Buckland, the Secretary of State for Justice, for joining us. Thank you very much to Turly, Humphreys and Nathaniel Campbell from Circle Collective. They're really fascinating contribution, but also, or I'd like to say personally, for their work, which is really genuinely inspirational and has given us all a lot to think about. Thank you to Colette of FTSE 100 Landsec for your contribution on the panel, but also thank you to FTSE 100 Landsec for partnering with ConservativeHome to make this event possible. I'm sure it's going to spark a lot of thoughts and conversations from our listeners, as well as from our ConservativeHome team after we go off air. And I just to say to all the listeners, thank you for your questions and your comments. Our next event is starting at 1 o'clock. That's ConservativeHome in partnership with Save for Children, talking about how to ensure low-income families with children get through the current crisis. So I hope you'll join us then. We'll have Vicky Ford, MP, the Minister for Children and Families, on that topic. And from me, until then, goodbye.